Hi everyone. So I'm going to go over a sample literary research essay for Gone Girl, and it's a good idea if you have sort of skimmed through the essay so that you can already have some context for like what I'm pointing out along the way. So if we look at the introduction, I feel like this writer does a good job of setting the foundation for the literary criticism lens that she's going to be using, and even including mentioning some of the outside research that she will be drawing from. So already we have sort of an established argument by the end of the introduction, and we know it's not just going to be a book report. So that is important to note, that this essay should be focused around an argument through a particular literary criticism lens, not just retelling the plot of the book. So if we look at the thesis at the end here, I would suggest that the writer combine these last two sentences, but by the end of the introduction, it is clear what her argument is, what she's going to be arguing specifically about Amy as related to gender roles. Okay, so if we go down to the first body paragraph, the writer does a really great job of establishing the complexity of Amy's characterization, and there's a nice sort of in-depth transition here where the writer talks about how Amy's rage is fueled by gendered expectations. So again, we're starting off with a more in-depth analysis than just giving us plot points. She has a point of view. She's using a particular literary criticism lens to start to analyze who Amy is. So if we go on to the next body paragraph, I feel like this is actually one of the stronger analytical sections because the writer does a really good job of closely examining Amy's childhood psychology and connecting it to feminist theory. So actually it's kind of addressing more than one prompt. It's both psychoanalytic and gender. And so we really start to see the psychoanalytic components of this writer's argument by tracing the origins of Amy's narcissism and obsession with control. So we're building on the previous body paragraph and going more in depth and actually going back further into her childhood and starting to offer some analysis. So if we move on to the next paragraph, the writer does a really good job of starting to weave in the outside research, both from Butler and Dragseth. So this is a really good example of how to integrate research into a literary analysis. So again, we're moving beyond just plot points and we're moving beyond just a literary lens. You also want to bring in outside research that sort of coalesces with what you're arguing overall. And instead of just dropping in some random quotes without any in-depth analysis, the writer really uses the ideas from her research to deepen the interpretation of Amy's experience. So it's really used as another layer of analysis in broadening out the source material. Okay. So if we go on to the next body paragraph, you can see that then she moves back to the novel, which is totally fine. You can go back and forth between the novel and research, paragraph to paragraph. You can also focus on all of your research later, as long as it has a connection to the novel. You can also talk about both in each body paragraph. So how you structure it is up to you, as long as you hit all the components of the essay. So I feel like this paragraph is also really impressive because the cool girl monologue is obviously a favorite part of the novel, and she does a really good job of deep diving, sort of almost line by line, or picking out some really key lines from that monologue and using the cool girl monologue to explain how it reflects male-centered constructions of femininity. So again, she's not just giving us quotes for no reason. It's really just the starting point for her to dig into the gender expectations. And we move on to another research paragraph here. So I feel like the writer does a really good job of deepening her theoretical framework here. And so she uses Butler's work again to explain how gender roles uphold unequal power structures. So even though she's sort of going back and forth between the research and the novel, she does a really great job of making sure everything is still related, everything still furthers her argument. So as we finish up sort of the last regular body paragraph, she really focuses more closely on Amy and Nick, their relationship, especially because she's writing about gender expectations. And so she also weaves in this last body paragraph, a bit of the psychoanalytic side. And again, that's fine. If you want to pull from a couple different lenses, that's totally fine. So she does a really great job of focusing on Amy's fractured identity and her narcissism through the lens of her relationship. And so she sort of looked at it from different angles: who Amy is, how she started off in her childhood, what are her relationships like, how does the idea of amazing Amy as she's growing up lead her to who she is in her adulthood, and then all of the outside research sort of shores up that argument. So a couple of other things I want to point out. She did include a counter argument, which I think does a really great job of acknowledging the criticism of Gone Girl and the argument that Amy's portrayal could also be viewed as actually anti-feminist. So you want to look at what other points of view could be and then come back around to why your point of view is still correct. And finally, the conclusion. She does a great job of wrapping up her argument without restating all of her ideas again. But she also succeeds in kind of a broader reflection about cultural issues surrounding womanhood, performance, and societal expectations. So she sort of broadens out her view and tells us, what can we learn overall from the novel? And that is how you should wrap up this essay. So I just wanted to go over some of the points that I think this writer did well so that you can make sure to include them in your essay as well.